Hello all, welcome to today's live stream. I thought I'd start things off a little bit early just to make sure everything's working okay. And I thought I'd start things off by looking at the NASDAQ because we've just had, or in the last hour or so, we had the non-farm payrolls, the US unemployment numbers. So I'll talk a bit about those as we go through today. As usual, if you're watching, if you could just confirm just in the chat that the audio is working okay, that'd be great, and then we'll get started properly. So if you haven't attended one of these before, we run them every week now, and we look at a mix of different markets. So we'll look at indices, currencies, crypto, commodities, just to see really what's been moving the markets this week, and take a look at what to watch out for in the days ahead, really, next week. So let me just start things off formally. If you can't hear me, you won't hear me saying this, but make sure your YouTube volume at the bottom is bumped up to max. And of course, once I've gone through the markets, if you put the markets you want to look at in the questions, we'll take a look at those. So it normally takes an hour is what we do for these things. So let's just do the risk warning first. It's important to understand this presentation is for educational purposes only, doesn't contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and contracts for difference are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 71.2% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Okay, that is that done. I thought before we get into looking ahead for the stuff for next week, we had these payrolls out an hour ago. Monthly announcement, non-farm payrolls, US unemployment numbers, how many jobs were added in the previous month. The expectation was for 1 million jobs to be added. The actual number came in at 266,000 jobs. Massive miss. Put a rocket under stock markets. This is the NASDAQ. So the NASDAQ, a minute before it came out, was trading at 13,650. And in the next couple of minutes, jumped about 120 points. And to some people, that might seem a bit strange, but because it's a suggestion the US economy isn't as strong as some had thought. But traditionally, that would be viewed as good for stock markets because it suggests that perhaps the Federal Reserve, the central bank, has got to keep rates low, has got to do more to stimulate the economy. We've seen the effect that stimulus has had over the last year. So the knee-jerk reaction was to take markets higher. And as interesting, I often say I'd never trade over payrolls because the market is a bit of a headless chicken, or can be a bit of a headless chicken. And here we are. We're back to, it's given up a whole chunk of those gains. This is a 1-minute candlestick chart on the NASDAQ. So we'll look at all of that in a bit more detail. So we'll take a look and see. But for now, let's jump back onto this, and then we'll go back onto the platform. So important stuff for next week, 11th of May, Tuesday. Chinese inflation data comes out in the early morning. Inflation is a hot topic at the moment, or has been in recent months, with some thinking that perhaps central banks aren't taking the threat of inflation seriously enough. I think it's interesting when we look at some of these markets today, a lot of the commodities or agricultural stuff, metals, have been gaining in recent months. Copper, we'll have a look at copper today, is at I think a 10-year plus high. Stuff like soybeans, cotton, coffee, all this stuff is going up, and you'd think that these raw materials are going to feed into inflation numbers. But let's see. But we've got Chinese inflation on Tuesday. Wednesday, UK GDP. How well or not is the UK economy doing? There's a news story this week. The Bank of England expects the biggest growth for 60 years or something in the UK economy. US inflation data, again an important one, on Wednesday next week, and then Friday, US retail sales. So next week, and of course we'll be back next week to do the live stream. Stock markets, new highs for the Dow this week. So we haven't seen it in the S&P, but new highs for the Dow Jones this week. 14-month high for the FTSE, Bit of a lagger for FTSE compared to some of these US indices, but we've seen it through 7,000 this week. We'll take a look at that. Gold and silver finally getting a move on. Gold and silver, traditionally not the most exciting markets recently, particularly silver, but 3-month highs for gold and silver this week. So we'll take a look. We'll take a look at those. Obviously, Bitcoin and Ethereum, new highs in Ethereum, absolutely rocketing away the Ethereum price. So take a look at that one. And crude oil, 2-month high. It's given back quite a bit, I think, in the last 24 hours or so, but it did have a bit of a run, crude oil. So we'll have a look at that. Foreign exchange, bit sideways across the board, really. Pound against the dollar, euro against the dollar, dollar yen, a little bit sideways. But we'll take a look at some of those there, have a look at the dollar index, all that sort of stuff. I'll also look at some of the markets I've been watching and trading. I did a trade on copper this week for my own account. So we'll take a look at that. Palladium I've seen has come up in the questions. We'll definitely have a look at palladium and have a look at perhaps some of these soft commodities as well. Right, let's get into it. Where should we start? Should we start with stock markets, as we're on stock markets? Let's have a look at the NASDAQ. NASDAQ is the most traded index, or one of the most traded markets actually with us, NASDAQ 100. After that, it's gold is the most part, and that's some cryptos first of all, globally. But let's kick things off with the NASDAQ. I'm going to say what I say about stock markets every week. The trend is up. I think the NASDAQ, it hasn't made new highs as recently as the Dow did, which was just yesterday, and the S&P 500. But the trend is still strong. I could, I suppose, move my trend line down so it looks something like that. And that's where we are. And actually, the last couple of days, it looks like it's come down to that trend line. Pick up on different trends within here. However we cut it, for me anyway, if you've watched any of the YouTube videos we do on our channel, if you're not subscribed, if you could click on subscribe now. I'm a big fan of following trends, and the trend in the NASDAQ is still up for me. It's only end of last month we saw fresh all-time highs pretty much for the NASDAQ. Trend line coming in at 13.2, bigger support for me, and let's not forget it's only the March lows at 12.2, so about 1,500 points away, 10% away from where we are now. It would take a breakthrough there for me to change my view on the NASDAQ. So for me, I'm still a buyer of dips, looking for a run back up above 14,000 at some point in the not too distant future. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at the intraday stuff. We'll have a look on the hourlies. Interesting. I love these sort of setups. When was that? What's the date today? The 7th of May. But 4th of May, market trades down to 13,500, runs up, and yesterday came back down to the same level and has ran up again. Lovely little simple support and resistance setup there. So for me, well, let's see how it goes in the next hour or so. But it's a double bottom. If you're a fan of double bottoms, broken out, I'd be looking to see if we can really put on a few more points this afternoon in the NASDAQ. So it'll be an interesting market to watch, I think, that one. S&P, there we go, S&P. Same old. Trend from March last year. So we're, 14 months into this now. Trend is up. Biggish support at 4,000. So about 5% below where we are now. Sell-offs, we do have sell-offs, of course, but they don't last long. You can see, actually, I've got this level picked up from a while ago, about a month ago. 40 in the short term, 41.20 has been good support for the S&P. Came back down to it again earlier this week, near it, and we've just seen the market move away. It'd be interesting if it can break that high set in the last hour, about 42.21, if it gets a move on. And that would be fresh all-time highs again, wouldn't it, for the S&P? Interesting one. Let's have a look on the old 5-minute chart. I'm not really a fan of 5-minute charts. Yeah, let's see what happens. It looks like it did have a look out to fresh all-time highs very briefly, just on that payroll announcement. So let's see what happens this afternoon. But for me, with a market that is clearly going up, I'd want to be a buyer. So let's see what happens. So that's S&P, NASDAQ. Let's have a quick look at the Dow because it saw all-time highs. Look at that. There's the Dow getting clobbered on the number. So 34,660 down to 34,490. So it lost 170 points. But all-time highs, again today actually, trend is up. Usual old stuff. So for me, I'd be a buyer on dips. You know, I'd be, if we put a trend line on that chart, see what it looks like. Looks like that. Support coming in around on the trend line around 33,000. Shorter term support 33.6 from the last month or so. You know, traders and investors have been rewarded for buying on dips. I was wondering how long it would take until someone mentioned Dogecoin or Dogecoin or whatever it is. 10 minutes. We will have a look at that. I still think it's a crazy market, but we'll have a look at that stuff. FTSE 100. So FTSE broke through 7,000 quite decisively this week. Let's have a look at it. And we've looked, you know, if you've been attended these live streams, you know, we've been looking at this trend all the way through whenever we look at the FTSE. So off the lows in November, good trend, chugging along, breaking out through 7,000. So for me, what's the next target? I suppose if we're going to be really ambitious, I'd be looking for a run up to 7.7, the 2020 highs for the FTSE. Recent support ahead of 6.8, you know, bigger support at 6.6. I've got a few trades on the FTSE anyway, so I'm quite happy with the move today. It's been a really good week for me, actually, this week, so I'm very happy. So a long way to continue, but for me, even if it dipped, I'd still be a buyer. You know, with the closest I'd want my stop, you know, I look at more swing trades, will be the other side of 6.8. So, you know, a strong performance so far for stock markets over the last few days. Let's see what next week brings in. And the DAX, let's have a look at the DAX, the old German market, volatile market, the DAX. But on the dailies, you know, big sell-off a couple of days ago, 15.2 to 14.8, big sell-off. But again, that trend off those lows, still very much up. Lots of support at 14.4 on the DAX. So even if there was a deeper sell-off, it would be headline grabbing, but the trend is still up. And finally, for stock markets, the Japanese stock market. Oh, what's it called? Nikkei. I think I've said before, I've got a few trades on the Nikkei. It's not going anywhere. It's really, I got into it a bit in December last year and added a bit this year. It's just a bit boring, to say the least, compared to these other stock markets, but lots of support, 28.3 on the Nikkei. So perhaps it will find a bit of momentum. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. It still looks a little bit boring, the Nikkei. Let's talk about oil. We did a video yesterday on oil. Yesterday or earlier in the week, I can't remember. I think it's interesting oil. We closed out, just had a couple of trades I've seen close on crude in the last, whatever it is, couple of days. There we go. So we booked, so if you watch that video, we had profits on some positions, moved the stop, so they got closed out. But I think it's also been filled, crude oil, filled on a weakness. So I ended up putting the video we did yesterday, put an order in to buy at 64.25, so filled at 25 and 24. The market's bounced a bit, stop loss at 62. And actually, at this moment in time, I think this is a first actually, I think every position in the account is showing a profit. Look at that, it's all blue. True trading genius. So all the trades are open at the moment. So again, we do these regular videos throughout the week and always try and place a trade, and everything has gone the right way this week. Doesn't happen very often. But crude oil. So in the video yesterday, I was looking at the hourly chart for crude, and we'd had this sideways period from March to April, and it started broke out, sold off, blah 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 blah. And the video we recorded yesterday was about here when the market was 64 or 65. And I said, I'm going to put an order in at 64.25 if it sells off with a stop down here somewhere. Because that trend is still up in crude. So for me, you know, the trend off the lows in April, so we're a month into this trend, is still up. You know, so the fact it's dropped from 66.60 down to 64, so it's dropped $2.50 a barrel. It doesn't change that trend, you know. So for me, movements like this are just opportunities within the trend. So for me, going into next week, assuming this trend was going to hold, I'd be looking for a run back up to 66, and perhaps on the daily chart, you know, my target would be a run back up to the March highs, 67.80. And then it gets interesting. If it does get up there and it breaks those highs, $70, you know, would be for me the next obvious target. I think, on that one. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But for me, that little trend, you can see it there, still very much chugging along. Should we take a look at silver and gold? Let's have a look at what should we do first of all. Silver. There was talk of this short squeeze, wasn't there, in silver? Another Wall Street bets inspired thing, I think. But whatever happens, I'd always say it's a boring market. It's got picked up a bit of volatility over the last week. We do have, I think, a couple of old trades somewhere in silver from 16th of Feb and the 1st of March. So they are just about in profit. It's interesting. We have been watching this recovery in silver. Perhaps the hourly chart is the better chart here to see the current trend in silver. So that trend is up. It just hadn't been very exciting for the best part of sort of 3 or 4 weeks. So for me, the trend is up. If I didn't have a trade on, I'd probably stay out of it today and see what happens next week. But you can see really strange moves the last couple of days, but spiking below 26.20 and buyers coming back in. So for me, if we saw it maybe perhaps under some pressure next week, pushed down sub $27, perhaps it looks interesting again for a buy the dip sort of thing. But if we go back to the daily chart, it's trading at its best levels since 2.5 months, just over 2 months. So perhaps it's going to have a run targeting just above $28. And then I'd get worried because it just doesn't seem to be able to hang on to 28 plus much at the moment. So I personally still think it'll be a long time, well, not a long time. It'll be a while before we see $30 silver again. But that recovery still chugging along in silver. And gold. I did mention, I think the other week, I put a trade on gold. Finally got a move on this week. It's interesting, gold, because technically, I think I said last time around, and the last gold video we do, technically the purest stance to take will be to do nothing, because we have a trend from the 2018 lows down here. You can see that, August 2018 lows. That trend's up, coming in at 1550. But this correction since August is still in place as well. So we've got a 9-month downtrend and a 2.5-year uptrend. It's going to be really interesting. You can see it come into that trend line now. What's going to happen next week? So I bought because of this double bottom type thing, and it broke out and blah, blah, blah. So I bought because of that. But it really it's going to be an interesting week, I think, for gold. I'm a bit nervous, actually, about the long position, but I think the levels to watch next week, 1860 to 1875, the old highs. I think if it can break 1875 next week, or at some point in the next couple of weeks, then it looks like finally this correction's over. And I'd then be coming up with much more aggressive targets, $2,000 plus for gold. The flip side, that trend is still down. If you wanted to go short gold, going short now, for example, of course, nothing today is financial advice, just for educational purposes, with stops above 1875. So I think that's going to be a really interesting market to watch. Oh, hang on, someone's spamming the channel. There we go. So interesting market to watch next week. I think the price of gold. See what happens. Should we do the crazy cryptos? Do Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been a bit boring, isn't it? We'll have a look at Ethereum as well. But Bitcoin, it's been pretty flat over the last week, but the trend is still up in Bitcoin. Trend's coming in at 36,000. We've got lots of support from 40, 43 through to 48. Bit flat overall. Trend's still up though. So for me, ultimately, the target would be for a move back to 64,000 plus in Bitcoin. And it would take a fall, a $20,000 fall from where Bitcoin is now. It's still in the trend. That's the difficulty I have of trading cryptos. The volatility is crazy. If we have a look at Ethereum, I did actually do a trade on Ethereum this week, just buying the breakout basically and chucking a wide stop on it. But Ethereum, and I'm obviously not using derivatives because you can't in the UK use derivatives on crypto. But traded up yesterday, 35.94 yesterday. I mean, it's been an absolute lunatic performance this year. That trend is up. It accelerated away from the trend in March. It does look overextended, doesn't it? But we know that cryptocurrencies can go much further than we expect them to. So I think I bought at 2.7 or something like that. So I've moved the stop up to break even. We'll see what happens next week. But undeniably strong for whatever reason it is strong. If we had a look on the hourly charts on Ethereum, look, it's almost perfect, almost a perfect trend line, little touch. Whenever it was, 5 o'clock this morning. You have to be up early to catch that one. I wasn't. So if I was a buyer now, based on the chart, where the closest I'd have my stop, the other side of 31.60, but probably the other side of 3,070 is where I go. But that trend definitely up in Ethereum. Let's see what next week brings. Let's go back to our more traditional markets. Let's do the pound against the dollar. Pretty boring week, pound against the dollar. I'm still bullish, pound against the dollar. I've still got trades on in my own account for the pound. But you can see, these are daily candles. We're higher on the week, but only back to where it was at the end of April. So a little bit boring overall. But for me, even though it's fallen out this trend, we still have higher major lows and higher major highs, just a little bit. You can see it there, can't you? You can see it on the hourly chart. So that was from, where's that? The 19th of April. So really just chop, to be honest. Euro against the dollar. I think the euro, I've got a trade on euro sterling. I don't have a trade on euro against the dollar. I could be tempted to be a buyer next week because I think it's interesting, euro against the dollar, because we have this rally from March last year. The trend is coming in at 117. We've had this correction in place. Is it trying to break out of this correction? I don't know, but I think it's an interesting market to watch next week. If we flip it over, that's the bit of a crazy move on the payrolls today. But I wonder if, let me just try and take this out a bit. We've had this trend up, bit of a correction. It actually started breaking out yesterday and it's had a move today. So for me, if we saw it under pressure next week and drops back towards 120.50, it's a potential trade for me with a stop the other side of these lows, 119.85 lows. So even though it's been a bit scrappy, I think it could be interesting, an interesting one next week. If we have a look at dollar yen, so dollar against the Japanese yen, again, I don't have a trade on, but I'll be looking to be a buyer because I missed that move. I missed this as well. So that's the trend in dollar yen from January of this year. Bang, bang, bang. Comes back to the trend line. So for me, it's still weak, but if we get a little bit of a bounce ahead of here, I'd be quite tempted to be a buyer down there. So let's see what happens with that one on dollar yen. Let's bring up, what should we have a look at next? We've done euro. Let's look at quick look at the dollar index. Then I'll look at some of the stuff that I've been watching. Then I'll jump into the questions. So the dollar index, I think I mention this every week. Well worth keeping an eye on the dollar index. So it's the dollar against a basket of different currencies. And I did wonder this year, is this the year the dollar makes a comeback? Okay, and the reason I was thinking that, we saw that massive down move from March, April last year. And all this year, it sort of feels like it's trying to stage a recovery. So I do have my biggest open losing position at the moment is on the dollar index, so in my own account, because I bought it on the way up here, thinking it was going to go higher. So we'll see what happens. But I think it'd be interesting to see what happens around these lows, these old lows, the dollar index down at 89.35. Let's see what happens. Does it come under enough pressure and hit those sort of levels next week? Let's see. Let's see what happens. That's it. What were we going to look at? Oh, other stuff. So stuff I traded this week. I traded copper this week. Clearly, because the trend is up in copper. And I think we had, if I take this right out, can we go, how far back do we go? That looks like today, it's at least a fresh decade high today in copper. And I've traded it a bit on the way up because of the trend. But if I put that in there we go. It was the breakout really that got me looking at it again. So broken out, I bought in a couple of days ago and the market's got a bit of a move again on. So I think that's been an interesting market. Palladium, we looked at that a few times in the past in Palladium. Here we go. The daily chart on Palladium, I had the breakout the other week. Had moved higher, sold off a bit. very volatile market, but a really interesting one to watch. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go into the questions and have a look. We'll have a look at the markets you want looking at. So we've got about 35 minutes. Oh, I should say, so there's a few questions about the portfolio here. So if you're new to our channel, the channel's been running since the summer of 2019. And back then, we thought it'd be more interesting to do trades, when we talk about markets, to do trades on the markets as well. So the account I use for the channel, it's a real account. It was funded by Capital.com. It operates exactly the same as a client account, so no different. And it started with £10,000 in the summer of 2019. So at the moment, the balance is 17 grand. So it's done all right. I must admit, I don't pay the attention to it I would do to my own account because we use it for the video. So I think we have given back chunks of profit along the way. But it operates exactly the same as a real account. We do it, if you watch the trades we do on the videos, really low risk approach, £250 risked per trade. I should up that now really as the account has grown. But that's a bit of information about the account that we use on this. Right, let's have a quick look. What do we have a look at? We looked at crude oil. We had a look at that. Palladium, we had a look at palladium. Well, this is palladium now. I mean, for me, that trend is still up in palladium. Interesting next week to see, does the strength come back in next week? I mean, that trend is coming in around 2.4 on palladium at the moment. So it's $400, $500 below where it is now. Let's see what happens. But for me, I'm still bullish on palladium. I've got a few trades of my own on palladium. Let's see what happens. Jubilee Metals Group. I don't know if we cover them, but I will have a look. We don't cover all markets because some companies are too small. No, we don't cover those. We looked at palladium. FTSE. Why is the FTSE such a lagging performer? The FTSE is always an interesting one. The FTSE is a lagging performer for a couple of reasons. The FTSE 100 index, first of all, it's not, even though there's 100 companies in it, it's not really a broad index. It's quite weighted towards, for example, oil companies, financials, banks in there. So if those sectors aren't doing very well, the FTSE will lag. Plus, of course, because so many companies in the FTSE derive their earnings from overseas, so they don't report in pound sterling, currency fluctuations, what the pound is doing, can have a really big impact on the FTSE. So a stronger pound can affect the earnings of FTSE companies when they report, and that does weigh on the FTSE. So the FTSE is something of an odd one. Thoughts on Alibaba, the online business, isn't it? The online Chinese business. Is it like the what is it? Is it like China's Amazon or China's eBay, that sort of thing? Do you know? I always have this, don't I? On live streams, I always have a little bit of a technical issue, just to give me a bit of a fright. Thoughts on Alibaba? It looks. We had a short on these, didn't we? And I closed it. Was it a couple of weeks ago? I closed it. For me, that trend is up. I don't know what's happened with the trend line there. There you go. We've got a great uptrend going on since 2016. So we're 5 years into that. I would be a buyer. I mean, if I had to do something, I'd be a buyer because the trend is up. The closest I have my stop, the other side of 210, but probably the other side of 190. So for me, it's an interesting one to watch next week. Someone's saying earnings next week in Alibaba. So let's see what happens. But for me, that trend is up. So as long as sort of 180 to 200 holds, I'll still be looking to be a buyer. Dogecoin, Doge, whatever it is, that stupid cryptocurrency. I would say what I always say every week. For me, it's a crazy market. I don't trade crazy markets because the volatility is nuts. But if you're in it and you've made money, good luck to you. The trend is up this week. It is crackers. April the 23rd goes from 15 to 66 a couple of days ago. So what's that? A fourfold increase and a bit more. So for me, it's an interesting one to watch. But it's just I find it hard to apply any sort of sensible risk management, should we say, to some of these cryptocurrencies. Oh, I should say, before I get into more, contact details and all that sort of stuff. So to find the platform I'm using clearly is Capital.com, it's our trading platform, spread betting and contracts for difference, all the different markets. I've got a Facebook page. I'm about to launch a training course, but if you go to the Facebook page, I do put bits and pieces up there during the week. That's davidjonestrading.com. Any questions after today, drop me an email. You know, we can't do financial advice, obviously, but any general trading questions, david.jones@capital.com. You can follow me on Twitter @JonesTheMarkets and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, if you could click on subscribe. You know, we put these regular videos out all the way through the week, 3 different videos a week normally. And we have just launched a stocks channel as well for US stocks. We've only put a couple of videos up so far. I'll talk more about that next week. But there's Dogecoin, the hourly chart. So what would you do? What would you do here? If you were treating it like any other market, if I was a buyer now, I'd have a stop the other side of 45. But you know, these cryptos are all a bit nuts, aren't they? Could we look at Apple? Yes, I think I've actually got an old trade in Apple from way back, or from the 5th of March anyway. Let's take a look at Apple. See what they look like. Here we go. Let's have a look on the dailies. See what it looks like. It's a bit boring, isn't it? We had this great, you know, if we go back clearly years and years and years, you know, we know we've got a great longer term uptrend in Apple. It's really suffered though, hasn't it? When is it? Since February. I mean, it's fallen out of the uptrend, but for me, I think as I said last week, just because something's fallen out of the uptrend doesn't necessarily mean the uptrend's over. So for me, I'd still be a buyer. So as a trade, I'd be a buyer at 129, wherever it is, 70. With a stop under 116 at the moment. I think if it falls below 116, that is quite a major trend change for Apple. So it's definitely lost momentum. But for me, I'd still be a buyer with stops at the side of that March low in Apple. So it's an interesting one. We looked at Apple. Gold, we looked at gold. Can we check CrowdStrike? Don't we look at that? Is that there? Hang on a second. I think you mention this one every week. Is this a subtle ramp you're trying to do on CrowdStrike to try and get everyone to buy? CrowdStrike, there we go. Trend is up on CrowdStrike. It's CrowdStrike, US stock. Came down to the trend line yesterday. Trend is still up. So for me, if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. Stops the other side of probably 160. It'd be interesting to see what happens actually, wouldn't it? It's come right back down to that trend line. So, but for me, trend is definitely still up. XPEV, let's have a look, hang on a second. I don't know if we cover them. Is it an electric vehicle company? Is that what they do? Yeah, EV company. So that's interesting. That is some volatility, isn't it? So ran up in November last year to, is it dollars, $72 a share? Is it quoted in dollars? Don't know. So for me, I mean, it's interesting. I suppose it's quite an aggressive trade for me because it's been so weak. And I suppose at a push, you could argue that trend is still down, couldn't you? You could say that is definitely still down. An aggressive trade, if I was a buyer now, I'd put a stop underneath the March the 5th lows around 25. So aggressive one. Good luck with it. Let's see what happens. How volatile is it? How much does it swing around during the day? Oh, I'm getting a few networky type delays here, aren't I? What's going on? Every time I open my platform, that Dogecoin pops up. Yeah, it's been pretty weak, isn't it? It'd be interesting. It's a really interesting one to watch down here. You know, we're still on XPeng or Speng. I'm probably saying it wrong. Ahead of 25. Let's see what happens. Can we take a look at Qualcomm? Let's have a look at those. We looked at those a few times in the past, haven't we? Let's have a look. From memory, was it a bit boring from memory? Yeah. It's interesting, actually, but it's interesting that this goes back to what I was saying. I mean, my background is technical analysis, so I, qualified as a technical analyst back in the mid-90s, and I teach one of the Society of Technical Analysts courses now. But I also know that a lot of technical analysis doesn't work how you're taught it works in the textbooks. And here's a great example: break of the trend line. So for me, this is why I say just because the trend line breaks, I wouldn't panic and be a seller. I'd give it a second chance. And I do wonder if what we're seeing going on in Qualcomm now is a new trend, but at a bit of a slower pace. So I could be, if I had to trade it now, we flipped over to the hourly chart, I'd be tempted, I think, to be a buyer. But let's have a look and see what the trade would look like. Well, something like that, I suppose. So where are they now? 137. So the closest I want my stop, the other side of 132. But what I'd probably do is go the other side of this low down here. So give it a bit more room, $15, $16, and see if it can build a recovery. And, you know, perhaps we go back and target 165. So I think it's interesting one, Qualcomm, down here, down at these levels. Let's see what happens. We looked at Bitcoin. International Seaways Inc. Let's have a look at those. I don't know if we cover them, but we'll take a look. International. Oh, no, I'm going to look at that carbon credit thing as well, Seaways. Don't cover them by the looks of it, unfortunately. But let me have a quick look. Because someone mentioned the carbon credits last week, didn't we? And so I added it into my list. What's it done this week? We're just going up in a straight line. It's gone up again. So May the 6th. So when did we do the live stream? The 30th of April last week. So if we'd have bought them last week at 48, we're up about €1 in a week on them, which is not bad. I think it's in euros anyway. Interesting market. I really should sort it out and do something with those. There we go. Back to Litecoin. You know, I don't want this to turn into a crypto live stream. To be honest, I'm not. You know, they're all a bit nuts, aren't they? Clearly, that's not financial advice, but you know, the trend is up. You know, the trend is up, breaking out today. You know, I think the issue with stuff like this is if you're going to trade it now, it was a great trend in Litecoin all the way up, brilliant touch of the trend line late April. If you bought it now, where would your stop go? I'd probably want it down here somewhere at 200. Which is miles away from where it is now. It's like a 40% stop loss. So I do have a problem with the volatility in cryptos. It doesn't really work brilliantly for my style of trading when they just go vertical. So you can't deny the strength. We're seeing, I'm guessing that's all-time highs in Litecoin. It's quite interesting, I suppose, back up to 2017 all-time highs. So maybe we'll see a bit of a problem up here at 370, 375. Maybe all the people who were buying in here because it was going to go to the moon and then saw it crash more than 90% will think, thank God I can get out of my Litecoin where I bought it. Let's see. I think that's an interesting one. So perhaps I shouldn't be quite so disparaging about that one. So that is an interesting one up here to see if it can break 372, 380. If it does break 380, let's say 380, it's a classic chart breakout, isn't it? So I'll make a note. We'll come back to that one next week. But you would expect perhaps a bit more back and forth trading up here. Let's see what happens. Will you be doing a course on your method of trading? Yes, I've recorded it. I think it's about 3.5 hours long. And I'm just building a website for it. But yeah, so you'll hear more about it when it's done. There's a lot of cryptos coming in. Thoughts on gold for the rest of... I don't know why someone keeps spamming this thing. Let me just put user in timeout. There we go. Hold on a second. Let's. Where were we? So you only need to put it in once. I will get to it. Thoughts on gold the rest of today? Don't know the rest of today, but you know. We did gold and we looked at that downtrend. Nexus. We don't cover Nexus. Sorry, we can't have a look at that one. Cocoa. Cocoa's interesting. Someone mentioned Cocoa last week, and it was setting up. Cocoa UK we looked at last week. I think they mentioned it based on the MACD from memory. I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting market to watch next week. Cocoa. So I think it was last week we were looking at it here, and the MACD had given a buy signal. And it was April the 30th, on this day here. And I said, well, I think we need to wait and see if it finds some strength. And I think it's interesting that Cocoa has come back to this 4-year uptrend. Look at that, almost textbook bounce off the uptrend line. So for me, I do have a trade on Cocoa, I think I mentioned, but I got in up here somewhere. So it's a losing trade I've got at the moment. I think if we got a bit of a pullback next week and a bounce, it looks like quite a nice little trade setup. Cocoa, so I think that's definitely one to watch. Oh, who's this other guy spamming? Remove that. Coco, yeah, we looked at that. Tesla. Tesla's been interesting, isn't it? It's back. I think I looked at it this week, and hang on, a little bit of an issue here, because it's in that big trend. $600, I think, was big support. Where are we? Yeah, 550, 600. I suppose if you really wanted to buy Tesla, it's quite interesting what's going on today. You know, we've had this weakness since the middle of April. We've seen a bit of strength coming in today. If I was a buyer now at 672, the absolute closest I want my stop, the other side of these March lows, 6 or 590, but actually the other side of here, March the 5th lows at 540. So I think it's interesting. This trend for Tesla is up. I mean, clearly it went crazy and went up to $900 a share. The trend for Tesla is definitely up. So for me, yeah, I would be. You need to have wide stops. This is a factor. There's been a couple of comments on the YouTube videos about why are your stops so wide on some markets, and it's because of the volatility. You know, let's say you bought Tesla at 672, you put a stop at, I don't know, 660. It's $12 away. It's nothing. You know, look at this day here in Tesla. It's an extreme, but the market moved $130 in the day. If we look at a normal day like yesterday for Tesla, you know, it's still trading in nearly a $40 range yesterday, 8% swings. So in these volatile markets, we need to give them more room. You know, so for me, I would be tempted to be a buyer, but my stop would be down here somewhere. I think if it breaks below these old lows, 535, it does look like that trend is over. Aston Martin, oh yeah, let's turn it into a car streaming channel. What do you think of it? It's really volatile. That flotation for Aston Martin. I mean, gosh, what a disaster. They've done clearly some sort of share adjustment here, but they came to them, I mean, they lost about 90% of their value, didn't they, in 18 months or something like that. Let me just see if I've got it with all the adjustments in. I am a big car nut, so I do take a bit of interest in these sort of stocks, although I think probably one of the quicker ways to lose money in the stock market is to invest in football clubs or car stocks, I think. But let me just bring it up on this so we can see it with the adjusted. So look at that. They came to the market back here, October 2018. They've adjusted it all out, 115 a share, traded as low as, 5p? Something like that. 95% down, Aston Martin. So, I don't know, if you fancied a punt, maybe. And I sort of fancy a punt because I think I quite fancy owning a share in Aston Martin, but it's not really going anywhere, is it? Looking at that chart for this year, it's gone nowhere really. So if I was a buyer now at 18.50, I'd want my stop the other side of 15, probably the lows for the year. But I don't think it's going anywhere exciting at the moment. Euro NOK, so euro against the Norwegian. Is it the krone or the kroner? I never know. Euro NOK. There we go. Let's have a look at that one. So the trend is down, isn't it? So what we're seeing here, we've got a few, I don't know if that's it could be Duff data or it's probably just a bit of a weird spike. The trend is down, so we're seeing euro weakness. So I would be a seller, maybe even a seller today. That's really good, almost textbook, apart from this little move here. So we had a move up yesterday to the trend line. So for me, if I was doing a trade now, I'd be a seller now with a stop loss. The closest I want my stop, either above yesterday's high, but actually I'd have it above the high from the 21st of April. So yeah, really weak, isn't it, euro NOK? But some support coming in, about 9.8. So it's an interesting one. It's not one I ever look at, but it's a really interesting market, that one. What else have we got? Can we look at pound against the dollar? We looked at that. The pound against the dollar. If you do have any general questions about trading, drop me an email. You've got my email address there. I'll put it up again at the end, and I'm happy to answer any. I don't want to go into it in too much depth in here, but I'm happy to try and give some pointers. Can you do synthetic indices, especially volatility 75? I've never heard of that. We do the VIX. Oh, volatility. Oh, these are VIX futures, aren't they? So we do the VIX, the S&P volatility index. Pretty boring market a lot of the time, but I've never heard of that volatility 75. Somebody mentioned platinum. Let's have a look at that one. Good trend in platinum. I do have some trades in platinum because the trend has been up. And it feels like it's trying to get a move on. You know, I did come out of some trades in this run up. And you can see now we've sold off, but we're still within that trend from March of last year. And I do, you know, for me, my target would be for a run up back up to these highs at 1340 on platinum. If I was trading it now, where would I put my stop? Probably the other side of these lows from March, to be honest. You could put more aggressive stops in here. But it does feel like it's trying to get a move on. It's just been a little bit dull, hasn't it? But that trend is still up. What's your thoughts on Twitter shares? I think it's interesting, Twitter. That was one of the videos we did on the stocks channel. Let me see if I can find the link. I did do a video on Twitter, but I can't remember what the channel address is. But I will find out for next time. But let's have a look at Twitter, because they got slammed, didn't they? I thought they were a bit unfairly slammed, actually, on their earnings this week, because it was their forward guidance. So they slightly beat, or last week, whenever it was, they beat on expectation, they beat on earnings, but their forward guidance for the next quarter was not what the market was expecting. But look at that, from a trend point of view, maybe that's the trade we'll do. We haven't done a trade today, and we normally do a trade on these live streams. It's back to the trend line. So for me, you know, this is a retracement in the trend. So the closest I'd want my stop will be the other side of the trend line, but it's a bit tight. So what I'm going to do, we've got these lows from back here, middle of January, at 44. I'll go halfway. I'll go 48 for a stop on Twitter. So let's buy Twitter. So we'll buy Twitter. We'll put a stop at 48. And we normally risk 100 quid on these trades. So I'm going to go, I do 24, and I'll do 20, so buy 20, 21. Okay, so I'm buying 21 Twitter, where they're trading now, with a stop at 48. My risk is 100 quid, so we risk 100 quid on the live stream trades. Let's buy that. Let's see how that one works out. So, but it's interesting, you know, from a textbook trend point of view, and I say textbook rarely works, so we'll come back to it, and it'll be like $40 next week. Let's see what happens, but it's back to the trend. But they were slammed on their forward guidance. So let's see. We looked at cocoa, sugar. Sugar's an interesting one. Sugar's had a run this week. Sugar US. There we go. I mean, the trend is up in sugar. I think you may remember when we were doing the live streams in March and we saw this happen. I was waiting for a pullback to buy it, and it never happened. So for me, the trend on sugar is still up. If it's sold off next week, it'd be better setup for me. For me, that trend is still up, so I'd still be looking for a run up to 19 or so. Can I ask you why you don't set profit target for your trade? Good question. I used to, up until, I don't know, probably 10 years ago maybe. And I think because I have learned from my experience, and it might be different for other people, the real winning trades can often go much further than you expect. So if we looked in this account at big winner at the moment, natural gas. So the natural gas trades, the risk would have been £250. It's up £546 at the moment. So I've made twice the risk. So for me, who am I to say that natural gas has gone far enough? So for me, I will trail the stop up behind it. So I will always give back profit on trades, but I will, you know, occasionally, a few times a year, I'll get locked into an absolute blockbuster trade that almost not doesn't make my year in trading, but I'm using palladium as the example from 2019 that made so much of my trading profit was made in palladium in 2019 from just adding into trades and trailing stop losses up because the market just went crazy. You know, so for me, that's why I don't set targets. I will just keep trailing the stop up. So, for example, at the moment, most of the profit on my own trades are in stock market indices. So S&P, I've got a bunch of trades on the S&P, the DAX, the FTSE. Look at it, it's all-time highs again today for the S&P while we're doing this. So for me, I've got lots of trades I've put on in this trend, and I'm just cranking the stop loss up, the take profit stop up higher and higher, but still staying in the trade, if that makes sense. It doesn't mean it's right for everybody, but it certainly works for me. There we go. Good question, though. Can you comment on crypto via inflation? Nope, no idea. In theory, who knows? I don't know. No, I can't. I don't know. So, no. Alibaba earnings were last week. Okay, fair enough. It was great earnings. Okay, fair enough. The cryptos don't show in my Capital account. I'll tell you why. They show in mine because my account has been tweaked slightly. But if you're a UK resident or you're trading through the UK FCA, you can't trade crypto. The FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, outlawed leveraged trading, so CFDs and spread bet trading on crypto. They did that in January. So I've got my own Capital account as well as a client of Capital, and I don't see cryptos in that account. This account, our YouTube account, has been enabled for stuff, so I do see cryptos, but if you're a UK resident, it's a regulatory thing. So there we go. Dollar Canada, yeah, dollar Canada is a little bit dollar index, I think, at the moment, if we have a look at it. So the trend is still down. Even today, it's made fresh lows for that move. So it's still a really weak market. The dollar against the Canadian dollar. We looked at pound against the dollar. We've done that, so you can rewind and watch pound against the dollar. What do you think about Palantir? I always get this mixed up. I always assume it's a drug stock, but it's not. It's big data analytics. I made that mistake last time round. It looks a bit boring to me, to be honest. I suppose an aggressive trade would be a buyer. Be a buyer now would be clearly nothing today is financial advice. So when I say I'd be a buyer now, that is just from a theoretical point of view. Please don't go and buy this stuff and then come crying to me if it halves next week. An aggressive trade, and we're back at these lows. The low in March was $20, near enough. Yesterday it traded to $19.34. So if I had to do a trade on Palantir, I'd be a buyer now with a stop at $19. But it's been pretty weak, isn't it? If you think the broader market is still doing well, it has massively underperformed, doesn't it? So let's see. Hold on a sec. I've just jumped forwards. Husqvarna, the chainsaw manufacturers, aren't they? That's what we need, more good old-fashioned technology, not this crazy Zoom and electric cars rubbish. They're doing really well, aren't they? Clearly everybody did their gardening in lockdown, didn't they? I am assuming that is them and it's not another company altogether. But I've got the right company here. Great trend, absolutely great trend. Let's have a look. I'm trying to think, the stock, I've got a stock that's doing really well. It just reminded me, John Deere, the tractors, isn't it? US tractor company. I'm having some real issues with my connection today. I think I'm in a big office building, and I think on a Friday afternoon, everybody just switches off and watches YouTube. So it hammers the connection. Great trend in Husqvarna. Came back to the trend line, bounced off it. So for me, my target would be for a run to 130, and perhaps it breaks it. If I was a buyer now, where would my stop go? I would probably go the other side of 110 at the closest. More conservative stop would be down the other side of $100, the last major low. The MACD is about to hook over and give a buy signal as well, isn't it? So nice little trend in that one. I'll show you the John Deere, the tractor company. There we go. I think it's tractors anyway. Yeah, there we go. Look at that, up again today. So I bought into these on a break somewhere. I think it was here. I can't remember. January, maybe. And they just carried on moving higher. They've gone a bit sideways for a bit. Hopefully they're going to wake up and get a move on again. So this is another, great example where I've just trailed the stop up on that one. So let's see. You managed to buy the dip this week on carbon emissions. Well done. Good work. Where else? Tesla. It was James who bought carbon emissions last week. Very good contribution that was. Nordic American Tankers. There we go. Nordic American Tankers. A tanker company acquires and charters double hull tankers in Bermuda and internationally. There we go. It looks a little boring, doesn't it? We don't have much data on it. You'd argue on the data. I would argue on the data that we've got, the correction is over. It's sort of having a go at building a base. So for me, the base is at 270. If I was a buyer now, that's where I would put my stop. But we don't have a new trend yet in that one. So we're a little bit sideways, but it does look like a stop going down, at least for the moment. What else have we got? Soybeans. I think we cover soybeans, but I think I'm going to jump onto my other platform because I was going to add to the trade in soybeans, but I think I might have missed it. Let me just bring it up. I think they broke out in the last few weeks, haven't they? This is why I think. I don't really get involved in the fundamentals, but this is why I do think that inflation, could well be an issue because all this stuff, real stuff, food and metals and all of that, is all going up. Here's soybeans. This would have been up to yesterday. This is end of day data. And you can see the moves. So soybeans have gone from 900 to 1560. So the price of soybeans hasn't quite doubled yet, but a great trend that I've been in. I bought some in December on the way up, and I added to the position in January. It's gone sideways up until the last month or so, and it started moving again. So lots of these agricultural things, really, and they're interesting markets to look at. They're a bit different to the normal stuff, but some great trends in some of these markets. Amazon. Yeah, let's have a look at Amazon. Actually, let's have a look at that. I think because they sort of broke out, didn't they? But they come back in again. So they've been sideways since July last year. Clearly got a massive lift because of the pandemic. Broke out, and then they didn't even close above the old high, but they did push out end of April. I suppose. For me, I'd sit and wait on Amazon. For my approach to trading, because is there a trend? Is there a breakout? I don't know. So for me, I'd wait to see if it ran back up to 36 or falls down to here. So for me, it's a bit of a nothing one on Amazon. So yeah. How do you use Bollinger Bands? If you go to our YouTube channel, Capital.com on YouTube, I did a video because I can remember doing it last year on Bollinger Bands, how to use Bollinger Bands. So if you scroll through the list of all our videos, I'm just trying to see if I can find it now. But we do a lot of videos, so they're quite hard to find. But if you go back to, I don't know if it was the summer of last year, but I did do. Oh, here we go. I'll put it in the chat. There we go. How kind is that? They were developed by a man called John. October last year, and here is the link to Bollinger Bands. There you go. Procter and Gamble shares. Let's have a look at those. Procter and Gamble. The connection's really not happy today, is it? I know I say this every week, but it does. It runs fine all the time. And then Friday afternoon, it's a bit hammered. Procter & Gamble, what do you think? It's a weird one, isn't it? I think I remember having shares in these years and years ago. I don't know. It's a really difficult one to call, isn't it, Procter & Gamble? I suppose if I had to do a trade, I'd be a buyer, I think. Because we've had this as it broken out of the downtrend. I suppose as a trading buy, I could be a buyer at 135 with a stop the other side of 130. Maybe it's not the most screaming to me buy me for my strategy, but it could be interesting. Thoughts on Micron? Is that the technology company Micron? I think I've got shares in these. Something. Semiconductors. So for me, the trend is still up in Micron. It's only April. It moved out briefly to fresh all-time highs. We've got good support at 80, good support a bit further out at 72. So for me, I would be tempted to be a buyer with stops somewhere either here or here. So it's lost a bit of momentum, but only over the last month. I think we've got to be patient, haven't we? So how much time we got? We've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'll do a few more, but let me just remind you, if you're going to disappear now, go to Capital.com. You can download an account, get a demo account. You can look at all this stuff I've been looking at today. You can download our app. Go to davidjonestrading.com, and I put little thoughts up occasionally during the week. The last one I did was on copper. Drop me an email, any questions, david.jones@capital.com. I think I do have some emails to catch up on from last week. I will do that over the next couple of days. At Jones the Markets on Twitter, and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Right, let's jump back onto the platform. So we looked at those. I'll whiz through. God, there's loads of questions about Doge. We did do that thing a bit earlier. Rolls-Royce. Let's have a look at Rolls-Royce. So Rolls-Royce is not the car company. Of course, it's Rolls-Royce. The engines is the floated company. So this has got nothing to do with the cars. For me, I knew what this was going to look like. For me, I look at a chart like that and then go on and look at something else. I've got zero interest for me. I suppose if you're doing it as a recovery play, you could be a buyer at 105, but then I would want my stop down here, the other side of those October lows, probably, or maybe at 80. It's still a wide stop, but for me, it's just, it's got absolutely clobbered over the years, Rolls-Royce. Okay, maybe it's making a base, but maybe it goes lower again, and maybe it goes nowhere for years. So for me, that sort of stuff doesn't really appeal to me for my sort of trading. But if you're in it, good luck. Right, it is 3:30 my time, so I am going to wrap things up there. Apologies if I couldn't get to yours. We do get a lot of stuff on these, but I hope you found it useful. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Helps the numbers. We do regular videos throughout the week, and more relaxed look at markets. We do have this new stocks channel. I'll talk a bit more about that next week. And we'll do it all again next Friday. Thanks for coming along. I do really enjoy doing these. As I said, it does open up some interesting markets that I don't look at. So, yeah, that's it, isn't it? Good luck with your trading next week, and we'll do it all again this time next Friday, or 2:30 next Friday.